Sunday Golds, our second episode of the week. Today is Thursday, March the 12th, and this is, of course, a Florida State baseball podcast. I'm Aria Masudi alongside Brett Nevitt. Appreciate those of you watching on Brett's YouTube, live on X as well, and those of you listening on demand on the podcast platform of either Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever else you may get it. We appreciate you. This, again, is Sunday Golds, a Florida State baseball podcast presented to you by Alumni Hall and Metro Deli. Alumni Hall, 15% off of your entire purchase. Get all your favorite Seminole gear and apparel in-store or online at alumnihall.com. If you use the code SG15, again, SG15, you'll get 15% off your entire purchase. Let them know Sunday Gold sent you, and thank them for us as well. They've been a great partner. Metro Deli, a terrific place downtown in Tallahassee for lunch. Go there before the ball game. Grab yourself a sandwich, a wrap. There are diehard Noles in there, and some animals who work in there too, Section B animals, I should say, to make it clarified. Brett, a lot to get to, I think, in this episode. To lay it out for our listeners and our viewers, we'll go with a recap of the Florida game, not the result the Noles were looking for on the road in Gainesville. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of that. Causes for concern, reasons for pause, right, on panic, and why this weekend against Wake Forest will be a really big matchup for the Noles' first ACC series on the road against a top 15 opponent. And then Noah Sheffield joins us on the podcast. A really good interview and a sit down and a conversation, more conversation than an interview. I think you guys will love it. Noah dives in on his time at Florida State, why he chose Florida State, sitting out last year and having to really earn his spot, taking advantage of it. And of course, we had to talk about him growing up in the same household of his dad, right? Gary Sheffield, 9-time MLB All-Star. And in my opinion, should be a Hall of Famer, over 500 career home runs. Noah goes into that relationship with his father and why he's his best friend, best mentor, and why he's able to carve out his own path as Noah Sheffield's. And I think you'll really like that. So we'll have that at the end of the show. Brett, good to see you, my friend, as always. Wish we were starting the podcast off with better news. I think we all wanted to go into Gainesville and take care of the Gators, who were reeling and not playing their best baseball. And unfortunately, you just couldn't get the job done. They came out there, and the Gators showed you why they have one of the most talented rosters in college baseball, especially on the mound. They really overwhelmed Florida State in that matchup, winning it 6-3.
Yeah, pretty much saw 95 plus the whole game from Florida's pitchers from the very start. And Skylar Sanford was kind of spraying with his command. And, Cal Fisher took advantage of that with a 2-out hit that gave you an early lead. But, once Florida was able to get the lead and then get to Barberry and get to Rittenauer in the back end of the bullpen, I mean, you didn't have much chance with the way those guys were throwing that night. And, they kind of just eviscerated your bats, to be completely honest, with absolutely unbelievable stuff and pretty jaw-dropping stuff for college arms. It felt like you were watching an MLB bullpen. I texted Aria, if these guys were wearing nameless jerseys and had uniforms on that were just for like a scout day, you could convince me that those were two big league relievers that you just faced. And man, I mean, they produced 10 outs and 10 strike. Those were all 10 strikeouts. In total, you struck out 18 times, and it is becoming a bit of a concerning trend when it comes to facing power 4 pitching. The last few games, it's 13 plus strikeouts in 3 straight games against power 4 pitching. It is a small sample size, but we're going to be able to find out a lot more this weekend going into Wake Forest and facing some of the similar arms that they had to face in Gainesville this past Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think this game occurs in parts, right? Like it took the form of chapters, and Florida State, seemingly, it feels like every time they go into Gainesville, they take the lead early in that game. And especially over the last few years, it does feel like, the Noles will strike first. And you got to give FSU some credit, right? Cal Fisher, big hit there. Those are the guys you would expect who have been in that environment before and have played against Florida with that emotions to deliver. I always talk about the environment is within, right? Within your own mental state and your own setup and how you handle that situation. Because truthfully, Brett, I mean, Florida's it's not a hostile environment. Like, I mean, anyone who's been to that park and has been in that scenario knows that like the fans are not creating a hostile environment. It is a very spring training feel. Like 50% of the crowd is sitting on a berm in the grass or standing up, and they're on blankets and they're having conversations. And even the grandstand, I think you could see on TV, wasn't completely full at UF. They announced the crowd of 6,500. It might have been 6,500 people, but it wasn't hostile or intimidating by any means. And it's definitely not like other SEC parks where you go and you and I have been to, and the fans are engaged all game and they're on top of you and they're really willing their team through innings and through big moments. You've got to be able to handle the rivalry of that more so than you have to be able to handle a hostile environment. And guys like Fish, I think, came in and did that. I was a little disappointed in the afternoon that Miles Bailey had, and we can get into that in just a moment on the way people are at that level, opposing pitching staffs will pitch to Miles. But yeah, Fish did get you off to a start. I think you could have took advantage better of the very first inning, the top of the first, when Skylar Sanford clearly didn't have any command, and he was struggling to get into the game. Did Sully come out, Brett, and talk to him in the very top of the first? I feel like I saw that. And there seemed to be an opportunity to be had there. And, you strike out on a pitch that's way out of the zone on 3-2, and Stutzer gets thrown out at second because he slid off the bag, right? He had beaten the throw down and slid off the bag. So you're out of an inning almost immediately, and you let a kid kind of settle in who was feeling the nerves, I'm sure, of facing his former team. But you did take the lead, right? And I thought John Abraham was not at his best, but I think the experience that John has showed in his ability to clean himself up a little bit, right, and get himself out of the innings with the 3 walks and a couple of hits sprayed. But that veteran presence of John, I think, allowed him to, maneuver through the 2 innings that he got in the 35 pitches or so. Not the sharpest we've seen him. I'm sure the walks were frustrating because I think he only had 1 walk going into the outing and he walked 3. And you were off to a good start. I think if you had told me going into the 3rd or 4th inning, you're up, 2-0, clearly that's a better start than the opposite. But yeah, just a lot there, I thought, early in the contest for Florida State to have a chance to I think, position themselves better for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think the couple base running outs from Stetzer obviously hurt in this one. I mean, between the 2 base running outs and the 18 strikeouts, that's 20 of 27 outs in the game on, balls not put in play. Instead, just on strikeouts and base running errors. But, the first one, I think he got a little unlucky just kind of coming off the bag. But the second one, is one where I think he was just trying to shut it down on a steal and then kind of slipped a little bit and got caught off by the catcher. But yeah, I think with John, I think that felt like, a pretty planned out outing of just going 2 innings and maybe 3 if they were able to get out of the first and second super efficiently. But I thought the whole night on both sides, the zone was pretty small, and the zones continue to get smaller and smaller the more that, the umpires get track man reports and stuff like that, and they're trying to be accurate. But to me, it seems like the zones just continue to get smaller, and you get more and more pitches in the strike zone called balls rather than the opposite way around. But yeah, I think, Meeble, you come in with Meeble and Kinnear in the third, both guys that have been throwing the ball well recently, and it didn't go well in that outing. It seemed like Meeble, the fastball, got barreled up a few times. Kinnear was almost able to get out of the inning and limit the damage, but I think, Florida came through with a 2-out hit that kind of extended it from 3-2 to 5-2, and that felt like a really big blow. And yeah, after that, you had some opportunities. I think you left 8 runners on base in the game, and we're 3 for 14 with runners on base. And most of the runners you got on base were from walks. But yeah, just not able to come through with the big hit when you needed to after Cal's in the second inning. So just not much going offensively after that.
And I think you got to give some credit to Brett, to Bavaro, who had an RBI. and he continues to show some ability at the plate. Some of the best pitching he's probably seen in his life, at least through, his short career at Florida State. But I think that cut the lead from 5-2 to 5-3, and then the Noles had another chance late in the game, right? They had a bloop single from Carnes, and I think Paulino hit a ball in the left center for a pretty loud single. And then he struck out a couple times there to end that eighth inning. Barbary was on the mound, or at that point did they go to Rittenauer?
No, I think that was when they brought Rittenauer in, and he struck out 2 in a row pretty quickly.
Yeah, because they went to the lefty, right? The southpaw,
Yeah,
who had a breaking ball. That was sweet. And then he gave up the bloop to Carnes, and you could see the fear in the Florida defenders' eyes when Sully came to talk to them. Was it Lawson who dropped the baseball? Is that?
Yeah,
man. By the way, how good is that kid? Like it's a big league ready bat. He walked 2 or 3 times, I think, and Florida State pitched carefully to him. And then Purcell, I can't remember, was it a changeup or it was off speed for sure. And it just kind of hung up there on the inside corner. And Lawson hit it a very, very long way for his 9th or 10th home run already of the season. If it's not double digits, it's 1 or 2 shy. He is off to a tremendous start. Man, there's a lot of talent at Florida. And, you and I can talk about philosophy. I feel like it's a better conversation not in season because I don't think, one, there's a whole lot you can do about it in season. So your roster is your roster. What you have is what you have. But it was pretty sobering to see some of the talent Florida had and some of the talent Florida State had. And not saying that Florida State's untalented. It's a good baseball team with top 15 talent. But then you look at Florida and you see 3 dudes running up into the high 90s and a couple touching 100. And I don't think a single guy that night I watched, other than the lefty, who was clearly a breaking ball specialist, was anyone under 95, 96 miles an hour for Florida on the mound?
No.
Sobering, man. And I heard some other, I've heard from, other podcast hosts and radio shows, and I've listened all week to just kind of hear the feedback and what everyone's talking about. And they're not wrong. I mean, it's a stark contrast in talent. But I do think Florida has a unique roster on the mound. I don't think there's many teams in the SEC that can match what Florida runs out there, especially in the back end of their bullpen. And is there anyone? I mean, Texas is a pretty good overall staff. LSU is taking back, but
the top 5 or so in the SEC. I think that's kind of
comparable
how they're built. Yeah.
You think so?
Think about LSU, Arkansas, Texas, just those teams alone. I mean, I'm sure Vandy's got some horsepower in the back end too. But that's how those teams are built. They have a ton of horsepower, and you're going to see some horsepower from some ACC teams this year too, some more than maybe you've seen in the past. Like I've heard from scouts that the ACC in general is, a tick up, if not more, from last year, just stuff-wise overall on the mound. So yeah, I think you're going to be tested pretty frequently, and we'll see how FSU can match up on the mound. I mean, I do think you have some really talented arms still. Like all 3 of your weekend starters are going to be draft picks this year, and Wes, I think high end is back first round, like late first round, and I think at worst at this point is like end of second, to be honest, with the stuff he's shown. And Beard is a guy that I think is like a top 5 rounder, and Moore's up there as well. But yeah, you definitely don't have the young like redshirt freshman and sophomore throwing 97 to 100 and 101 like Florida was running out there in multiple cases. It was impressive to watch. There definitely was a drastic difference between the 2 pitching staffs in the game, but that doesn't mean that Florida State can't have a good pitching staff. I came out of it more concerned about the bats, but really at the same time, it was like I don't know if Aaron Judge would have hit those arms that night. Like, to be honest, like Rittenauer was throwing 99 to 101 with a disgusting slider at like 92, 93, and Barberry wasn't much different. So I mean, you needed to get to them before that, and you had your chances before that. Really the inning where Cal had his hit could have had an even bigger inning. Like at the end of the day, it was a 3-run loss on a Tuesday. You play Florida 2 more times this year. Like there was a pretty big drastic difference in the stuff on the mound, but you still have 2 more games to go and see what the 2 teams look like overall against each other, I think.
Yeah, you're right. And I like what you said about the key to that is trying to put Florida away early because you don't want to get to the 7th inning on with what Florida can probably run out there in a close game to run it, to try and shut it down.
Yeah.
I think Florida for much of the year, if they are ahead by 2 or 3 runs going into the 8th and 9th, will feel pretty solid about shutting it down. High Point, people were like, well, how did High Point beat them? And they do all this. And I got texts from friends, and High Point led big in 2 of the 3 or maybe all 3. Yeah, I mean, you got to get to them early. You got to find a way to get to that UF staff. And you had your chance, in my opinion. They were walking you too, right? Like Florida had 9 walks on the day, and you could tell it was upsetting O'Sullivan. And
one of Florida's weaknesses is their defense, I think, this year. And when you don't put the ball in play, you don't put the pressure on that defense to make some of the errors that they made against High Point, I think. Yeah, I mean, High Point also went and beat Duke on Tuesday, I think, as well. So, I mean, it's also just baseball. Like, I could have told you that Florida was going to come out. I think I said it on here. Florida was going to come out pissed after losing a weekend series.
And you took the lead, Brett. I mean, you were up 2.
This was a complete carbon copy of last year's game. Like you got overwhelmed by a whole different tier of stuff that you faced on Tuesday than that versus what you were facing the 2 weeks before that. Like the 2 weeks before that, you were facing 88 to 92 at best for the most part, and then you hop into, all right, here's 97 plus the entire night with power breaking balls, and good luck. Like it's going to be a struggle to get your timing down on those fastballs when you jump from what you were facing to what you face on Tuesday night and what you're going to continue to have to face going to Winston-Salem on Friday.
You guys are going to hear this when Noah Sheffield joins our show here later on. He essentially said, not in the same exact words, but what you just said about, you need that moment where it's an uptick, right, in velocity, and it's a difference from what you've been seeing. And he said it felt like it would help them as they get ready for Wake Forest, right? It's a good precursor for you going into Wake to have now seen this because Wake does have multiple guys with similar high octane stuff. And before we preview Wake, your thoughts on the offense? I know that's where you wanted to have some conversations on this, but 18 strikeouts, you're not giving yourself much of a chance on a 27 out basis, right? And so, what were your biggest concerns? Why the concern after, they scored something like 60 plus runs in the previous 5 games, the caveat being different pitching, but it wasn't like the lineup was struggling coming in.
Yeah, it has to be just the level of play and what you saw in Texas and then what you saw on Tuesday versus what you saw the rest of the season for the most part. I mean, I went and broke it down right before we got on here, and in the 4 games against Power 4 teams, you're scoring 3.75 runs per game, hitting .215 as a team with a .625 OPS, a 32.5% K rate. Against non-Power 4 teams in 12 games, you're scoring 10.3 runs per game, hitting .332 with a 1.002 OPS and a 17.84% K rate. So a 15% difference in the K rate is the biggest difference there, as well as, almost 400-point difference in the OPS. But, obviously a 4-game sample size is really small, so it's something that we will continue to track. And you expect there to be a difference between that competition and in the P4 competition versus non-Power 4 competition, but you don't want it to be that drastic, and you don't want the K rate to be 32.5%. You don't want it to be anywhere near that going forward. In the last 3 games against Auburn, then Nebraska, then Florida, you struck out 13 times, and 14 times, and 18 times. So that's 45 times between 3 games, and you're just not giving yourself much of an offensive chance at that point. And you've also only hit 1 home run in those 4 games. Now, that is at 2 really big parks in Florida and Texas, at the Rangers ballpark. And you're going to go to a much smaller park at Wake Forest, and you're going to be in some pretty small ballparks this year. Georgia Tech is incredibly small as well, and Clemson is too. So you have some opportunities. And Hauser, we know at some point, I think, will play smaller than it has to this point, and we saw that the last few weeks as well. But there's definitely been a difference in what the quality of at-bats have looked like, depending on the competition. And I think a lot of that is like when you're facing better competition and you're facing higher velocity and better overall stuff, like it's going to magnify your pitch selection and your overall approach and some of the stuff you're doing there. So we know it's an aggressive offense, but like we've said before, they have to be selectively aggressive rather than just being aggressive to just be aggressive. And that'll be tested greatly by Wake Forest's pitching staff.
What did you notice about the way Florida pitched to Miles and how they attacked Bailey?
Yeah, I think all of the teams at this point have the same pretty similar game plan against Miles. They're going hard in and soft in on him, breaking balls down into his back foot. He's seeing the back foot breaking ball pretty consistently over and over again. It's just kind of looked like something he's had a bit of a hard time adjusting to. You don't want him to miss the fastballs that he does get to hit, that rarely he does get in the zone. But, at some point you wonder if, you sit soft, but that's just something that's really tough to do, and to let the fastballs go by. But, I do feel like at some point Miles will make an adjustment to what they're doing, and then, teams will make an adjustment to that, and he'll have to make another adjustment. So, but he has to make them make that adjustment, I think, or else they're going to continue to go there. Like it's not a secret. Like me saying it on here isn't some revelation. Like I think Miles knows it. Teams know it that are facing him, and that's pretty consistently what they're going to. And that's just something that he's going to have to fight to work through and try to, make it a strength rather than a weakness moving forward.
Yeah. Some shout outs though to some guys who I thought had moments that they can build upon. Fisher, of course, I thought the single there on a fastball adjustment, the opposite field, was big, and you need him, right? You need that kid hitting in big moments for you. He's been there in a lot of those different scenarios, environments, and situations. I thought Putnam had a pretty good day overall. The double was important, and he walked a couple of times. Paulino didn't strike out in the 4 at-bats he got, and he laced a single in his final chance. He reiterates to me that the bat talent it's real. Like, and you got to get him opportunities, because that octane didn't seem to phase him. And it won't. He's a pure hitter. And that kid knows how to put a barrel on a baseball. Bavaro impressed me. Like, yeah, he had a couple of ABs that I thought, made him look like a freshman adjusting to this level for the first time, but he continues to also produce for you. And I think that's important. Carnes, of course, I think showed me something as well with a couple of hits. Now, granted, they were bloops, and it wasn't like he was really barreling any of those, but still important nonetheless. And I actually thought Dowd was pretty good too. He walked once, and he barreled a baseball that I think on a different park, certainly at Wake Forest, that would have flown out of the stadium pretty easily. And he's been good for you since coming back from that injury. So those were my keys there. I actually thought Stutzer was a mixed bag. He made a couple of really nice plays in left field. Obviously, you're going to, wish that he had the 2 base running mistakes back, but he also walked a few times, right? And that's not easy to do against that talent leading off in your first game in that kind of environment against that type of team. So it wasn't all bad. It was majority not good. And there were moments where you were really overwhelmed by them. But I did think there were pieces within that game that you do have to take and hopefully apply to Wake Forest and find a way to win that ball game. Well, win those ball games, I should say, in multiple, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll hit on the arms because you hit on the bats pretty well, and covered pretty much everyone who I was going to mention. I thought O'Leary took another step in the right direction. I think you're seeing him start to make some strides, and I think they're making some adjustments to the pitch mix with him as well, and kind of not so much the pitch mix, but the usage within the pitch mix. Jeez. And I think they're starting to go to the curveball a bit more, which I really like the curveball. I think it has a chance to be a really good plus secondary pitch for him. It also looked like they started to use the changeup a good bit more too, almost like a two-seamer, kind of pretty similar to Bryson Moore's changeup. And Stokes, I think Stokes might have touched 100. Don't know for sure. Sometimes the broadcast gun at Florida runs a little hot. Sometimes the scoreboard gun there is also a little off too, and sometimes I know the scoreboard gun there was Aria told me it was down 1-2 versus what the broadcast gun had most guys at. But Stokes, yeah, first two batters really good, and kind of lost it again. And
he did touch 100, by the way, Brett. The FSU staff did have him on their own metrics at triple digit.
So, we've talked about, we thought he would get there, and the staff has said that, and he has at this point. But obviously, at some point, you need him to get the fastball in the strike zone. Just really struggles with commanding it. It just takes off to the arm side pretty often. I think he threw one right to the backstop. The Carnes fielded pretty well. But I think Purcell, the one he hung to Lawson, I think it was like a breaking ball, and Lawson, not the person you want to hang one to, and he hit that ball about as far as I've seen one since Cags was there a couple of years ago. He's starting to look pretty similar to Cags at the plate. Maybe better hit tool, but the power is pretty crazy. That was all I had on the arms.
Do you feel better or worse about the arms going into ACC play? Again, it is one game, and I think losing to Florida always seemingly pours kerosene on a fire, if that makes sense. That's how I've always viewed these. It's more of an emotional boost or emotional depressor when you play these single one-off games for the fan base. But what were your thoughts? They treated it as a bullpen day, right, for just about everybody.
Yeah, I've had some of my doubts about what some of the arms were going to look like when they got to face some better competition. And Meeble and Kinnear are a couple of those guys. Kinnear just because of the numbers last year and the hard hit rate last year. And Meeble, I had some concerns from some hard hit rate stuff I saw in just a couple of live looks myself. And some of that stuff popped up, but that was also just in the 5 at bat span for those guys. So, was it just one bad outing, or is that more of what they're going to look like versus these bats? Purcell has kind of looked a lot different. The first outing when you saw him was extremely sharp, and then since he's come back from the injury, not as sharp. But I think his second inning against Florida worked a 1-2-3 inning, and you still feel pretty good about his experience. And like I said, O'Leary seems to be moving in the right direction, but at some point you need more consistency out of Stokes, I think, to be able to trust him. It seems like maybe Manka is going to be out for a little bit. Link said that he wasn't available on Tuesday, and didn't have much of a comment there, but just said he was out and unavailable. I didn't take away too much from one midweek game, like on the whole season, stock up or stock down. I just think that once we get through this weekend, now you start to really figure out a lot more, because can you get more from someone like Gabe Nard like you expected? Like, I think the numbers right now aren't nearly what you expected coming into the year from a guy like him, especially with the experience he has. So can some of the more experienced arms like Nard and Purcell get back to form of the past? And, can guys like Kinnear and Meeble get back to the form that they were against non-conference? I mean, non-Power 4 teams before Florida.
Yeah, I think one note, and we'll move on to the Wake Forest series and start previewing that. But 89 strikes, I think, 82 strikes in 159 total pitches for FSU on the mound. That's just north of a 50% strike rate. Not going to get it done against good baseball teams. So that's got to get, I think, trending back in the right direction this weekend at Wake Forest. But we've always talked about this. Weekend series is where you have the best evaluation of your team and truly understand what you're going up against on a weekend to weekend basis, right? And really stacking teams up. And I wish Florida State and Florida would play on the weekends, but for now they got the midweeks. You get 2 more chances, I think, 2 weeks from now in Jacksonville, and then 2 weeks from then back in Tallahassee. So still an opportunity if you win the game in Jacksonville to have a rubber match in Tallahassee at Hauser, and I can't even imagine what that's going to be like if that's the case month of April. But all right, Florida State, Wake Forest, Friday, 6 o'clock, Saturday, 4 o'clock, Sunday, 3 o'clock. First 2 games are on ACC Network Extra on the ESPN app, and Sunday is on ACC Network on the national TV channel. So you get your first television game of the year for Florida State on national TV, and that should be good. Could be a rubber match, and that would be a compelling television. So you got 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and the 3 o'clock is, I think, because ACC Network's doing a doubleheader, and FSU will have the second game of that Sunday doubleheader. So late getting back for FSU on Sunday night, but worth it, I think, to get a national TV game, to move that game back a couple of hours and play it at 3 p.m. Brett, this is a big opportunity, man, for Florida State. Not just because it's ACC play starting, not because you want to be above 500 right out of the gate if you can be in conference, but because this Florida State team needs, I think, some quality wins on its resume. 13-3 after 16 games. No real, good victory yet in those 16 games. I think Michigan is a decent win, but you do need some opportunities on your resume to start stacking up some quality victories because they do matter. And you're going to get a lot of opportunities in ACC play. Not to mention that Wake's won the last 2 series against Florida State, right? And last year was humbling. 2 years ago was a really good series that came down to the wire a couple times against that FSU team that made it to Omaha. Playing up there will be interesting. You and I have covered that up there, and we've heard the environment. And I don't know if it's hostile, but it is irritating. And they will find ways to try and get under your skin. The players start it, and the fans really do back them on that. And I would expect if there's good weather this weekend, Wake will have 3,000 or 4,000 people at one of the games, and it should be a pretty good environment. Always a really good Seminole contingent in the Carolinas who come out and watch those games. It's a cool ballpark, small ballpark, former big league ballpark that they turned and handed over to Wake Forest, a minor league ballpark. But yeah, wind blows out all the time. It's smaller. It's an offensive park. I would expect some double-digit outbursts from both teams potentially this weekend. And I'm curious to hear your macro thoughts on the series overall before we break it down and get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, a really tough series to start ACC play. Wake Forest is always tough. The way they run their offense, it's tough to get them out. They have one more walk than strikeouts this year, 126 walks, 125 Ks. And on the mound, you always know they're going to have a ton of stuff. 227 strikeouts and 144 innings so far this year. And yeah, the ballpark as a pitcher can really bug you just based on, some pop-ups are going to go out of the yard sometimes. Pretty short to the corners, not too deep to center either. But yeah, I mean, they're 15-2 overall so far this year. hitting 313 as a team. They haven't lost at home so far this year in 11 games. I think they're coming off a midweek loss like Florida State is to a good team in Coastal Carolina. And I don't think that game was very close. I think they lost 10-4 in that one, but that was the first time they had lost since opening day when they lost to Houston in Puerto Rico. So I think they're still a team playing with a ton of confidence, especially at home. And they have some guys that are really, really hot at the plate. I mean, Luke Costello has 7 home runs in 10 games that he's played, so that could be a problem. And Javar Williams has 17 stolen bases and 24 runs in 17 games, so you might not want to let him get on base.
Yeah, I mean, it's an offensive club, right? And they've coined the name Wake Forest for, I think, the first 5-6 years of Tom Walter's career over there. And, he's played for a national championship at Wake Forest. They've had some really good teams, some serious talent. They're 12th in the country right now. The 313 overall team batting average. And over really the last 5 years, they put so much money into a pitching lab, and they were really on the forefront of that technology and making sure that they could break down that information and develop pitchers. And they have. And you'll see a ton of octane that comes through the Wake Forest program. And, they've had the Louders of the world, right? The Rhett Louders of the world and the Chase Burnses of the world and so on and so forth. And I really do think they've become one of the best 5 programs in the ACC on a year-to-year basis. And I think last year the last 2 years they've been a little bit below what their standard probably is under Tom Walter, but they're still making regionals. And it's another top 20 caliber program this year that I think with the rotation they have has an opportunity to do more damage than just a regional this year. Good lineup, as Brett mentioned. It's a pretty young lineup. I do think Cade Lewis is a star, and they hit on that in the portal last year when they got him, I think, from a smaller school. And Lewis came in and really, really figured it out for them. Costello, Dalton Wentz, really good baseball player as well. And then they have, what they always have, a couple of kids who can slap hit, to center and left field and find ways to be pesky and get on base. And they've got guys at the bottom of the order who will find ways to get them over and get them in, if that makes sense. And some serious thump in their order too. They play well at their park, much different team at home than they are on the road. And they really play to that environment, their fans, and that ballpark with the wind always blowing out, it seems. And pop-ups at the Couch, as they call it, the Couch family ballpark, pop-ups seemingly just keep going at times. And unique all-turf field that, in the outfield, FSU is going to have to get used to the carpet changing colors. And then there's a wall there. And it's a cookie-cutter park. And like you mentioned, it's different dimensions everywhere, and you don't really have to get a hold of one all the time to run one out, especially with the wind blowing out. So I'm curious to see how Florida State handles this, not just the bat. So I do think we'll find a way to get some things going again. If they're not striking out, right? I mean, it's a Wake Forest team that strikes out a lot of guys on the mound, and you've got to put the ball in play. But if you do that, there's a good chance that it results in runs, especially at that park. I'm curious to see how FSU's pitchers handle that ballpark, especially Mendez, Beard, obviously, and more. There will be times where you think you have an out, right? And there's a pop-up and you feel like you've made the pitch and it's just going to keep going. And it'll end up being a home run. The key will be solo home runs are fine. What you can't have happen is walk or a hit by pitch, bloop single, 3-run homer that was floated into the sky. And all of a sudden the game changes, right? With a 3-run homer. These games typically sometimes have a backyard beer league softball game vibe to them where you're up to a 5-0 start or you're down 5-0. And the next thing you know, you're 6-5, 7-6, 8-7, 12-11. And you're just trying to offensively slug your way to a victory. I expect at least one of the games to go like that this weekend, if not multiple. But you see the pitching matchups, Mendez versus Morningstar, Beard versus Lavonis, and Moore versus Marston. And for Wake Forest, Morningstar, Lavonis, Marston, all three are guys who run a fastball mid 90s into the upper 90s, and Lavonis has been in the triple digits this year. So there's going to be some high octane with some serious secondary pitches off of that. I remember Morningstar from last year pitched really well in Tallahassee in one of those games. And Lavonis and Marston are young pitchers that they're really high on that they've worked in. So, Brett, I know you have more on each of those guys, and then I want your thoughts overall on the weekend.
Yeah, I think Morningstar last year, I think he threw 5 innings against FSU and only allowed 2 runs. If I can remember correctly, I think like they got to him really early on, and then he kind of settled in after that. And Wake Forest ended up running away with that game in that series. He was someone who started for them all last year, 14 starts, 3.87 ERA in 79 innings with 93 strikeouts. Kind of an interesting low slot guy that, hard sinker baller type. I think he faced FSU his freshman year as well. I remember when we were there, I think he came out of the bullpen against that 2024 team. But so far this year, 4.95 ERA, does have 28 Ks in 20 innings. But, you can get to him somewhat, I think. He's not someone that's like an absolute shutdown Friday guy, but you are going to face someone who's an absolute shutdown arm on Saturday. And Chris Lavonis, if Dax Whitney didn't exist, there'd be no doubt that Lavonis is starting pitcher 1 for next year's draft, the 2027 draft. Lavonis is a 5-pitch mix guy. So far in 19 2/3, he has 41 strikeouts. So he can strike him out with the best of them. That I think I think the K rate's above 50%. All right, so far this year. Yeah, 53.2% K rate while also only walking 7.8% of batters. Opponents have a 506 OPS against Lavonis. So it is top of the line stuff. It is a legit dude on the mound, and it's going to be a tough and tall task on Saturday for them. Last week against Stanford, he did give up 3 runs in 5 innings. So they got to him a bit. And I think he gave up a couple home runs against Stanford, which were the first 2 home runs he had given up all year to this point. And then on Sunday, Duncan Marston, he's coming off a rough outing against Stanford, gave up 6 runs in 3 innings. He hadn't given up any runs to that point in the year in his first 3 starts or first 3 appearances up to that point. I think he might have been injured or something like that at the beginning of the year. Didn't start his first 2 appearances, but has started the last 2 weeks. Another sophomore, the 5-pitch mix. I think he's someone that was kind of, out of the bullpen for them last year as a young freshman guy that was highly rated out of high school. So all 3 arms that have good stuff, but Marston not coming off a great outing. None of them had superb outings against Stanford last week. I guess Morningstar actually did have a decent outing. Morningstar has bounced back the last 2 weeks after, having the first 2 weeks went pretty rough for him. Gave up 4 the first week and 6 the second week, and since then has only given up 1 run in the last 13 innings. So he's been peaking at the right time going into ACC play. Overall thoughts on the series. It's always tough when they play Wake Forest. It seems like Wake Forest has kind of had their number in recent years. They have some offensive players that I really like as well. Dalton Wentz was another guy that was on Brewster in the summer with Brody DeLonglear and Brendan Lawson on that team, and Cal Fisher was on that team as well. So got to see him a good bit, and he's been off to a good start this year. And like I mentioned, Javar Williams is an extreme weapon with the way that FSU has not been able to control the run game so far this year, which I think is partially an issue with the catcher and also a major issue with the pitchers not being able to control the running game. They got to try to keep Williams off the base because when he gets on, he's going to run. It's like Chase, but doing what you would have expected Chase to do this year. If the ball had been in play more and he'd been on base more, like he gets on base, he's going to go and he's going to turn that into a run. So this is a good team, and it's an interesting park. interesting times this weekend too, with 6, 4, and 3. Just the 4 and 3, nothing weird about 6, but yeah, I'm interested to see how this weekend goes, especially Saturday against Livonis. We'll be really interested to see how the offense can handle that stuff.
Livonis' numbers are just stupid. I mean, it's 6 walks and 19 and 2/3 innings to 41 strikeouts,
Mm-hmm.
a whip of .81, and batters are hitting 143 off of him. I mean, he hit a no-hitter through 6 innings, and they didn't let him go back out to finish due to pitch count. Now, the one thing, Brett, he hasn't gone above 85 pitches this year in any of his starts. So I do wonder there, like, what is the amount of, what's the length that they've got on him? And if you're Florida State, can you just fight enough to get him out of a game in the 5th inning? Can you run a ball out, similar to the way was it Max against Chase Burns a few years ago, and they got some early success. You're not going to have sustained success against Livonis. So can you work a hit by pitch and a 2-run homer into the jet stream? That changes the complexion of that game, especially if Beard can get you deep into it, right? Into the 6th inning. That's another thing I'm looking for. Trey hasn't gone above. I don't think he's gone 80 pitches yet this year. So can you get 6 innings out of Trey? Can you push him into the 90s? And can he look effective for you? You're going to need some big performances, right? You need West to come out there on Friday and get the job done against Morningstar, who you mentioned has pitched well over the last 2 games. And teams are only hitting 205, Brett, off of Morningstar. So it's not like – it seems like it's self-inflicted wounds on his part, not necessarily teams that can have success against his stuff. And Marston's similar. Duncan is 190 against, and he's only walked 3 guys in 15 and 2/3 innings with 29 strikeouts. That's pretty incredible. And not surprising. I don't know out of the pen what Wake's going to run out at you. They got a guy from Davidson and Evan Jones who's been, locked down for them. He's only pitched 6 and 2/3 innings, but he's got 2 saves off of it, 1.35 ERA, 1 walk, 14 strikeouts, batters hitting 0.91. Seems like he's one of the guys, right, that they're going to bring in late in the game to try and shut it down for him. So,
yeah, that was something I was going to add. It was just their bullpen did give up a lot of runs against Stanford last week. I think they gave up like 12 runs in 13 innings, I want to say. So, that is, potentially a weakness for them. And it looks like they walked a lot of guys out of the bullpen. So that is an area that you potentially could get them if you can get the starters out of the game early.
And you're willing to walk. I think if you're a team that's willing to take pitches and not, swing away at a, 0-0 slider out of the zone or 1-0 changeup that's down, you've got to find ways to be able to battle. That's what when you get a guy out of a game, right, like a Morningstar or Livonis, it's because you battled and you got them. Maybe you didn't have the success that you wanted in the 5 innings, but you set yourself up as a team to have success later in the game because you got those guys out. And I'm looking more at their bullpen, and there's some familiarity, right? Will Ray's been on that team, and he's done a nice job. Luke Schmolke is a name that I remember. Zach Johnston's another one. Reese Bowie and some of those guys have been there. And so I think Matt Dallas, the transfer from Tennessee, is out for another couple weeks. He was in their rotation, and it got Marston some opportunities, to get in there as a young freshman. So, yeah, man, I'm interested. We need Bryson Moore on Sunday to go out there and not have a small ballpark be his worst enemy, right? And have guys running balls out on him. And, if he can settle in and get you 5 innings, what's the availability of John Abraham? Is it Friday? Can he go another 30 pitches, or is it Saturday that you hold him off to? How does Florida State piece things together with the rest of their pen and what they have available? And this is going to be a war. It always is at Wake Forest. That was a really good series 2 years ago, Brett. I mean, it was you and I went up there, and that was excellent baseball. It didn't go the way Florida State wanted it to go, but it was exciting, in my opinion, that type of weekend up there in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, it was hectic. A lot of runs, a lot of walks, a lot of wild pitches, and a lot of hit by pitches. I remember. But yeah, it was a hectic weekend at that ballpark. Interesting environment. I was just trying to think. I feel like John will be available on Friday. I think through 35 in Florida. You were talking about that, and I was just trying to think about how many days of rest compared to Friday to Tuesday, versus Tuesday to Friday. But I would think that he'll be available to go on Friday, and maybe they go back to the pairing of Mendez and Abraham on Friday to try to get through that game, and then try to piece together the rest of the weekend from there. But we'll see. It should be a pretty telling first weekend of ACC play, and the first of a pretty tough first 5 weeks of ACC play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was talking to some of the staff members at Florida State, and they were curious to see how this group would respond in this environment this weekend, because it would signal, I think, trending in the right direction if you can find a way to manage a road series victory at Wake Forest. Obviously, I think that would also ease some of the blow, right, of losing to Florida in the midweek and put you on track again moving into next week. If you can find 2 wins here this weekend, tough place to play for Florida State. So anything else you want to touch on, Brett, before we wrap up and get to this Noah Sheffield conversation as he joins the show?
No, intrigued to hear your conversation with Noah.
All right, I think that's going to do it for us, at least here on Sunday Golds. Don't exit out, because Noah Sheffield will join us in just a moment. The interview with Noah Sheffield on the back end of this podcast. But I'll sign off, at least for this recorded segment here between me and Brett. Brett, we'll revisit this thing, man, on Monday. Hopefully, fingers crossed, good news for Florida State. Noah Sheffield joining us here on Sunday Golds. We are getting set for Florida State and Wake Forest from Winston-Salem. Another top 25 showdown for the Noles this weekend, and they get to start ACC play. I know Noah's probably excited about that and getting his feet wet in conference play. On the road is going to be a hostile environment. Noah, first and foremost, my man, appreciate you joining Sunday Golds. I think this is the debut on the podcast for you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem. Let's get through it, man. I mean, this has been a cool journey for us to watch you from, Jesuit and getting the opportunity to come to Florida State. I have to commend you. You were patient. You waited your turn, but the opportunity presented itself, and you've taken full advantage of it. Can you kind of take me through just the first year that you got to Florida State? What made you choose to be a Nole? Why Florida State? And then take me through that first year of learning the system, learning Florida State, and then preparing yourself for the opportunity.
So FSU was obviously a dream school of mine, and even with the coaching changes and stuff, it was always where my heart was at. I also have family up here, so that's actually where I'm at right now. So I have family up here, ties up here, and so and close to home. So 4-hour drive, and it was always just like a place I wanted to be at. My first year, it was a very much of a learning year for me. I was sitting behind Alex Lodis because I came in as an infielder. I didn't really do a lot of outfield last year, but I was sitting behind Alex Lodis and then Drew Farrow as well. And I mean, I just had to sit there and learn and understand the game. And there's kind of like little things that I learned. Like I did a chart last year, the opponent pitching chart. And honestly, as much as nobody likes really doing charts, it honestly really helped me with my game, because I was able to understand pitch sequences and what counts you normally would get this and that. And it obviously helped me as a hitter. And then I went to summer ball, developed in that aspect of just getting the at-bats and being able to manage my body and stuff like that. And then came back in the fall, still unsure of what my plan was, and just trying to fight for a spot. And always having that drive to fight for a spot kind of allowed me to get into that position that I got into on the first game. And obviously I took advantage of the opportunity, and I'm just trying not to look back.
Yeah, I'm pumped for you, man, because I had talked to people, and I know that has to be a challenge, right? You know what you can do. You know what you're capable of, and the talent you have, and how hard you work to just get to Florida State and knowing you could make an impact. And people were telling me, Noah will love Florida State. That's part of the biggest reason why he could have jumped. He could have gone to, the grass can be greener somewhere, but maybe not. But he loved Florida State. So I'm thrilled to see that the opportunity has presented itself. I don't believe in luck. I think luck is, preparation meeting opportunity. And clearly you prepared and got the opportunity, and you haven't looked back. And so, what was that year like for you trying to be patient, right? Because in this day and age, it's not easy to be patient. knowing that, you could have gone to, any number of schools and played, but now you're playing at Florida State on a daily basis?
Yeah, that the patience was, I mean, it was tough for sure. Just going to the field practicing and then knowing kind of like you're not really going to be playing, but be ready for the end of the game. You might get your ABs here and there. You kind of always just had to be focused. And in the dugout, even though I kind of wasn't playing, I always tried to be a good teammate and cheer my guys on and just kind of be a support system for them, because obviously we had a Golden Spikes guy at shortstop last year, and I'm honestly, you're just watching greatness. So being able to watch that and learn from him and take advice from him and stuff like that kind of really helped me along the way. And I also had other teammates that played roles into that. Like Jackson West was a good role model, kind of in a way of just being an older guy and trying to hound rules into when you go into a college clubhouse and being able to see how things are ran. And Cam Leiter, just really good guy to be by your side, and kind of because he also was hurt, and so mentally, like we got to talk on certain things for him to give me mental advice and where to keep my headspace at. And I always knew the capability of my game, so I was never worried about that. It was just when the opportunity presented itself, I just made sure I had to be ready for that. And that's like, you can't pout and just be sitting here like, man, why am I not playing and stuff like that? Because in saying that opportunity, I just would have struck out. Then who knows what would have happened, or if I didn't execute in that opportunity. But I always just stayed positive. Even when I saw my name not in the opening day roster, starting lineup, yeah, it kind of hurt a little bit, but I was still on the same mindset of last year of just be a good teammate, wait for your turn, and when that opportunity presents itself, just take advantage of it.
What's amazing about that too, Noah, is, we're doing the game on the broadcast up in the booth, and me and Chris Chavez are looking at the list, and we're thinking, all right, Sheffield's got to get a shot, right? And so you get the pinch hit opportunity. Do you remember that moment? I mean, obviously it was only a couple weeks ago, but you came through, and since then you haven't looked back. Taking advantage of your opportunities, it's working for you right now, right? And you're hitting 328. I think you're top 10 in the ACC in RBIs. They found your little home there at the 2-hole, and it's working for you there. What right now at the plate do you feel like has you in a groove?
It's actually funny. So right before I came back up from winter break, I went down to Miami area to this hitting lab area, and me and my dad just kind of found stuff to work with in my swing. And I ended up standing up taller. So we started standing up in my swing and keeping my hands a lot looser. And then I just started being able to hit the ball elevation, because a lot of the hits I was getting in the fall, I mean, I was hitting the ball hard, but it was more like ground balls and just sneaking through here and there. And it was just kind of keeping me surviving in the hits. But I wanted to get into my power and create the extra base hits and being able to do jobs. So we ended up working on that, and I eventually got into some power. I had a home run in the preseason, some extra base hits, and I was like, here we go. Like, now we're starting to get into something. And then I kind of take my mindset into, if I don't do well, like, how am I going to react to that? And so certain, like, if I strike out, just so what, go worry about the next one, and don't let it ponder you and affect how you have your next at bat. And so I just really honed down on a lot of mental stuff for my game to, like, allow me to be successful. And I was really big on that, and just being able to talk to people. I use a journal. I write down what I want to happen for myself, just so I kind of really make things happen, because you don't want to go back and look at the journal and be like, oh, I didn't do that. But like, it allows you to focus and kind of just worry about being the best you can be.
You have to manifest. I believe that.
Yeah.
100%. And I like that you mentioned your father, and we'll get into your dad in a little bit and that relationship. But man, you hit those 2 home runs last week, right? And Noah, I saw you after the batting practice against JU, right? You taken BP, and against JU, I think you finished with like 4 home runs in a row in BP. And it seemed like something clicked, and we made eye contact, and I said, it's close. And you had a fly out there to left field, right? Where you got the pull side and you just missed it. And then the next day against Mercer, you hit your first career college home run. Do you remember the home run, or do you black out on your first career home run when you're running the bases?
I remember it, but so on the celebration, normally we take off the helmet and throw it and then do all the boom and stuff, or if you want to do the spin around. But I blacked out when I got to that point, and I was just kind of running around the bases, and I was just like, wow. Like, this is crazy. Like, I finally did it, got my first collegiate home run. And when I went to go jump and celebrate, I left my helmet on because I just totally blanked out. And then something just sparked in me, and I started getting in the dugout, and I just got fired up. And I was just like, let's go. Like fine, like just kind of just fueled everything that I've been going through with just the process and everything like that. And then the next day, I was just like, all right, cool, I got one. Now let's worry about trying to hit the goals that I had for myself in the beginning of the season. And then I hit the second one. I was like, oh, we might be on to something. So I got the second one. I enjoyed that one a little more because I got to I knew it was gone off the bat. And I took my time around the bases, messed around with McGahee at third. And we just enjoyed that one.
Yeah, man, that's exhilarating. It was cool for us to be able to call that. Got to give you early congratulations, but not too many congratulations because you'll have hopefully plenty more coming in the tank. I got to ask you about stealing home because that's rare, right? Like not everybody. You look like Ricky Henderson trying to steal home plate, and you took it. Can you take me through that play and just what was going through your head when did you realize down the base path that, all right, I might have a shot to actually have this plate?
So we actually talked about it in our pregame meeting. I think the guy's time to plate was like a 3.5, just like his wind up and pitch. I think it was like around a 3.5. And if you should definitely be able to get to a base before that time. So it was already in the back pocket, and I think he wanted to try it with John, but he didn't kind of go for it. So when it got to my turn at third base, then he gave it to me. So I just took off. Me and Ty were at third, and I was like, man, give me the green light. This guy's slow to the plate. And then they gave it to me. And then me and Ty were joking. He was like, here you go. He gave it to you. And so as soon as he went, Ty was like, go. So I start taking off, and then I'm looking. I kind of peeked in, and I saw him. I was like, oh, I'm there. So I took off, and then I went head first, and then everything kind of blacked out after that. And I just got up, let out a big scream, and I was just like, man, like I just stole home. Like this is sick. And so just got real fired up. And I really just try to get fired up certain things to kind of rub off on my teammates. Cause I mean, if you get fired up, then another guy's just like, man, I'm gonna get fired up. And then that weekend was a great weekend for us. Everybody started getting their bats hot and stuff like that. And it was just a great weekend.
Yeah. My voice cracked on that call. I was so surprised. I couldn't believe 3/4 of the way home, I went, he's actually trying this. Like, I'm like,
definitely threw everybody. I know it threw everybody off.
It did. It's almost like skydiving. Like once you jump, there's no going back. You're going all the way for better or for worse.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned being a spark plug because I think that's one thing this team has needed from somebody. And it can come from a couple of different guys, but you felt like a great candidate for that, of being the energizer and a guy who can bring a spark to the rest of the dugout. Link used to always say, he would point out the field and go, you have to have energy there and bring it back here. And he points into his dugout from the field. Mm-hmm. What kind of pride do you take in possibly being that energy piece for this team this year, to be a guy that can spark the rest of the lineup in the dugout?
I mean, obviously, like I want to be able to mesh with both sides of our team. And like, I had to experience the first side of being on the bench. And so there's guys that are clearly not happy on being on the bench and stuff like that. And then I just feel like I can be a light for them because I had to go through that. So our young guys that are just sitting down doing the things I did last year, like I was a big vocalizer on the bench last year. Like I'd be like, let's go, good swing, like this and that. And like going up to them, hey, the pitching chart saying this is a sequence, like just trying to do something to be a part of the team and really just help us out. And now that I'm on the other side of that, now I get to understand what that's like. And I'm trying to just fire up both sides in a way so that people understand, like when it's your time and you're rooting for somebody, it's a lot easier for people to root for you when you get in your moment. And that's how you build up a team. And then you just allow them to go farther because everybody's rooting for each other. And there's not, you want this person to do bad because you want to get in. It's, this guy needs to do good so we can all win. We all want rings at the end of the day. And as a team, that's how we're going to get it.
That's very well said, because it really is an iron sharpening iron situation, right? Especially at Florida State, when you have so many kids that are so good. And I think this team, Brett and I were talking about it on a podcast episode maybe a couple weeks ago. we can't remember a time that there's this many options that could play at Florida State and do a good job. And that there's only 9 or 10 spots available, right, really to play. And that's got to be difficult for a lot of guys, but that's also part of what you get into when you come to a place like Florida State, or when you go to an LSU, or when you go to Florida or Arkansas or Texas. A lot of guys who can play baseball at a very high level, and there's really only so many spots. So I think that's a great lesson that you have to learn. And it's crazy because you had to go through it, right, yourself. You've seen it firsthand on what that's like. So in many ways, it feels like you're growing as a leader. Do you agree with that the leadership piece is coming into form for you too?
Yeah, and it's definitely cool to see our freshmen getting in the games, like Kelvin, John, Will. Like it's extremely cool to see them and their production. Like Kelvin, Will, and John, they're like really good players. Will was a sleeper pick for me. Like I always knew he had it in the tank. He's shown it, and like in the inter squads and stuff like that. And I was always like, this guy's good, and it's cool to see that like we have that, and nobody knows because there's nothing really on them because they're all new to college, and so there's nothing. And it's the same with me. There's nothing really on me yet because we're all new into getting into the game and everything like that. And we're all gonna be here. I'm here for another year, hopefully, and John's here for another 2, Will's here for another 2, Kelvin's for another year, and that's just creating depth. And the guys that we have is like there's just so many options. Like we really have to the point where now I get why some people are aggravated of being kind of like behind people or something like that, but it's just like this guy deserves to play, or this guy deserves to play, this guy deserves to play, and it's really just who's taking advantage of the opportunity at that moment. And that's kind of what I love because it keeps you on your toes. Like I have to produce for me to keep playing because this guy right behind me is right on me and he wants to play too. So in a way that really helps our team, and we just have to continue to be like just helping each other out and just rooting for each other because I mean, if you when it's your turn to get in the game, you just need to go in there and you do your job to help the team. That's really what it's all about.
100%. And the young talent, I think, has you guys positioned to be outstanding for years to come as you guys continue to grow. I do want to touch on, you have such a unique upbringing, right, with your dad being a 9-time All-Star and being Gary Sheffield. What's that relationship like between you and Dad? I mean, obviously, you were a little bit too young to remember his playing days. I think you would have been like 3 or 4 when he retired.
Yeah.
But there's so much baseball knowledge in his mind that he can help you with. So first, what's the dad relationship like with you and Gary?
Yeah, me and him are best friends. Like I'm a complete replica of like everything to like the food we eat to like our habits. I mean, they're the same. Like I put Tabasco on every single food item that I eat, probably other than like pizza and stuff like that. But like, I mean, like me and him, he ended up putting me on to Tabasco and when I was a young kid, and I still do it to this day. And like, it's just kind of funny about that. And like, just like habits that we do, you don't notice it until my mom will point it out and like, man, your dad does that. And then it's just kind of funny. And then he ended up coaching me when I was 14. I finished a travel ball team. I think it was like 13. No, it was 13. We ended up going to Cooperstown, winning it all. And then I was like, I don't have a travel ball team and I don't really know who I want to play for yet. So my dad ended up creating a team. And then that's when I moved from outfield. I was an outfielder before I was a shortstop. I was a center fielder. And then my dad was like, hey, we're going to learn how to play shortstop. I want you to be a shortstop. And so he created a team. I learned how to play shortstop with the help of a guy named Tony Nunez. He really helped me because my dad, I always wanted him to help me with my hitting and stuff, but I always told him just be my dad. Like I really want baseball for myself, and I don't want you sitting here wanting stuff for me because that's not going to allow me to be successful at the next level if you're sitting here trying to make things happen for me, and it's just not going to work that way. So he agreed, and then I always put in the work, time, and effort just all on my own because I really want this to be my life. And so I really just told him you get to sit back, relax, and just enjoy the show. And as of right now, he's enjoying the show. He'll call me after the games. He'll send me texts before the games. Just always just checking in, being like, good job, or hey, you need to just fix this thing right here. That's kind of all it's about is you just fix this here and there. Everything else is good.
I love that. And I laugh because I see him sometimes at the ball games and he's got the shades on and he's got a ball cap and he's putting the hoodie. He's trying to be incognito and in stealth mode as much as he can because, he gets swarmed wherever he goes. And so I leave him alone. I do my best to stay away. If I'm not calling a game, I don't go up, and I'm a Braves fan, so I grew up a big Braves fan, still am to this day. There's a hat on the back there, and so I have good memories of Chef and the 509 career home runs. A lot of them came with Atlanta, but it's cool to see him. I've heard from a lot of parents that they're more nervous watching their kids play than when they played, and that just goes down because there's nothing they can do to control it. So
That's definitely him. I'm talking about if you want to see somebody more nervous than themselves not playing is him. I mean, and that's kind of where I come in, where I've always been like hey, like you don't got to worry about it. Because he sees the work that I put in and like he understands everything. So like from the mental side of things that I've dealt with, just to having somebody like him that's been through it and has experienced probably way worse things in a way, just due to like time and era and stuff like that. I mean, just learning from that, like I've just learned a lot of stuff, and like that's really helped me with my game and being able to be mentally prepared for certain things, because baseball is really 70% mental and 30% skill. Like if you really, I can hit a ball 109 like I did against UNF, and I was hitting balls 109, 108, and they're just catching it. And then the average goes down, but that's a good day for me. Like even though the average didn't show the day, like that was a really good day because I'm finding something in my swing that allowed me to start getting into my power, which led to the home runs and RBIs.
You have to have that perspective in baseball, man, because it's like you said, it's a game of failure more than maybe any other sport that's out there. A guy who hits 300 is still failing like 70% of the time, which is wild to think about. Those guys are Hall of Famers when they hit 300 and still fail 70%. The bat waggle, right? It's iconic, right? He had it. You have it. Has that always been something that you had since you played, or when did you pick it up, and when did you know that it could work for you in your game?
So I kind of always, I had like I used to hit like this, and when I was growing up to like 12, and some of the swings I had as a kid was just terrible. But like I was just kind of a bigger kid, and so I just had a lot of power. Like my 12U season, I had 20 home runs that year, 10 in Cooperstown, 10 in the travel ball, and it was pretty cool. But then when I was 13 years old and I started getting into the perfect game stuff, I told my dad, I was like, hey, like I'm gonna copy your swing, and because I already did this stuff, so I started being like, hey, like I'm gonna copy your swing. You're gonna tell me exactly how to do it, and we're gonna do it correctly, and I'm gonna be where I'm gonna be at. And I started hitting home runs with it. And it's like the same kind of story of when he said he was messing around with it when he first started doing it. He was like, man, I'm starting to hit home runs with this. Like, why am I gonna switch things up? So started hitting home runs with it. Playing child ball games. I'm going backside. I'm like, man, like this is pretty cool. Like I'm copying my dad's stance. And then obviously I got a lot of attention for it growing up. A lot of like perfect game would post it and it would go viral and stuff like that. So always just the older I got, the game gets harder. So I have to make little tweaks to the swing here and there to adjust to timings. And I've also kind of found my own little thing for that swing, and just kind of like, it's the same idea, but I have my own kind of style with it.
Yeah, it's not a complete replica. And you can see it, like if you put it side by side, there's a little bit of differences. And so it's funny you say you have it. Every kid in their backyard back in the day would do it too. I promise. Obviously, none of us are as good as you guys, but we would try when we're playing wiffle ball or playing in the backyard with friends. And so it's pretty cool, I think, for people who love baseball to see it come back and see you have success with it. Last question on your dad, and then we'll wrap up here. What's the best piece of advice he's given you, either as a father or as a baseball mentor?
Yeah, don't try to control the uncontrollable, or it's like something like that. Like, don't try to control the uncontrollable. And that's kind of, let's just let stuff happen and just kind of just persevere through certain things. Because like again, like when I was on the bench, like I couldn't control that. Just I had to be ready for my moment. And when I finally got that moment, like the thing that popped up in my head was just, you just can control the controllable. And like, oh, that's the same. Control the controllable. That's what it is. Control the controllable. And so when I finally got to when the bat was in my hands and it was my turn, I finally got to do what I needed to do. Took advantage of the opportunity. Trying not to look back since. And that's really kind of how I live day to day. Just really just living in the moment. I'm not worried about a game 2 weeks from now. I'm worried about when we go to Wake Forest on Friday, and then I'm worried about Friday, and then whatever happens on Friday happens, and then Saturday, I'm worried about Saturday, and just really just trying to be the best version of myself each and every day I go out there.
No doubt about it. The game against Florida, obviously, not the result you guys were looking for, but you'll get to see them 2 more times this year. What was the biggest takeaway from that game and facing that level of arms as you got back on the bus and started thinking back about some of the adjustments you guys can make? What was the biggest takeaway from that game?
I mean, you have to tip your hat. Like, they wrote out like 3 guys throwing 100 miles an hour. And then, I mean, their whole staff was 95 plus. So, I mean, after playing non-conference games and stuff like that all year and then getting that, it's kind of just like all right, well, we got Wake this weekend and it's about the same thing. So, good thing we saw them right now and be ready for Wake. So, we kind of – nobody's really like mad and like, oh, man, like this sucks. Like, I mean, of course, losing to Florida sucks. Like, we want to beat them. But, I mean, we definitely took it as like a learning thing, and everybody's just kind of just taking a reality check on like what we really need to do and take it into this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, and you guys, again, get to play them 2 more times. You get to see those guys in Jacksonville and then at Hauser when they get to come to your ballpark and face your fans.
Yeah.
You talked about the talent about this team. Do you ever just sit back and enjoy watching guys like Miles Bailey hit the baseball? Like
as I get to learn, I get to see it on the bases now. So I'm on second base, so I see him hit a home run. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's great.
That's farther than most people hit them.
Crazy, man. Like BP from him is just like, we used to hit with wood in the beginning of the year, and he would do it with wood, and it's just ridiculous to see like when he came in here, the work that he puts in. Like, really, people don't understand like guys like him and stuff like that. They really are putting in work, and like it's not just like you're just blessed with being like this size and stuff. It's like you can be the size, but you can still suck. And I mean, I've seen him put in so much work and time and coming in late at night to go hit and just really hunker down on what he loves to do. And I mean, it shows on the field. Like last year as a freshman, like, I mean, dude, we went to the ACC tournament. And I think we're playing Duke. I mean, the world's farthest ball I think I've ever seen him hit. I'm clear as the bleachers, and I'm like, wow. And I mean, that was crazy. I'll never forget that home run. Like, that was ridiculous. And then just to be able to go backside off the scoreboard with ease is just, I mean, I've never seen nothing like it. And yeah, like Miles is a cool dude, and he's hitting right behind me. So I have a lot of protection when I'm up hitting. I can get the fastball and do a lot of damage with it, which has led to a lot of RBIs because they don't want to pitch to him. So, I mean, it's just cool to be able to be on the same team with him, and hopefully everything goes well for him in his future.
No doubt, man. You got big leaguers right next to you, hopefully. And I have full faith that you'll be joining Miles at the big league level when your time comes too. So that iron sharpen iron, man. Good luck this weekend at Wake Forest. That's a big one for you guys, and all the best. I've been very proud to watch you, honestly, continue to grow, get your shot, and make the most of it. That's why we do what we do as broadcasters and podcasters is to do things like this and then be able to watch you guys on your journey. So long way to go still. Have fun this weekend at Wake Forest, man. Thanks for taking a few minutes and joining us here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.